Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Osborne. Welcome to Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain live Q&A on Thursday. If you've got questions you'd like me to answer, go ahead and start typing those into the chat box. If you're new to the show, that's the name of the game. You've got nutrition questions. Hopefully, I've got nutrition answers for you. If you missed our show on Tuesday, it was a crash course on creatine, the supplement creatine, and all of its benefits and potential uses, how to dose it, how to take it, when to take it. So we talked about kind of all the particulars. So if you've got questions, again, beyond that show, fire away. If you haven't watched that show, you got to go make sure that you check it out. So we're going to dive into your questions now. Give me a minute here because I don't have my tech team with me today. So I'm doing things a little bit on my own, and I'm not as tech savvy as my team. So Jim's asking, with ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis is what I'm assuming, Jim, would creatine monohydrate and therapeutic doses of B vitamins be beneficial? What about TTFD? So even better than TTFD, I like benfotiamine, Jim, for any kind of autoimmune neurological problem, including ALS. And I would start with, 300 milligrams a day typically is what I would start someone on. And we'd go higher even than that in some cases. But creatine could very much potentially be beneficial. It's not used as necessarily a treatment for the illness itself, but it can be used to improve strength and to improve energetics of strength with a degenerative neurological disease. So from a quality of life perspective, you might find it very, very helpful and very useful. And in that situation, I would probably do a loading dose as well. So I would do, instead of just taking 5 grams a day, I would probably do a 7-day load at 25 grams a day before going to that 5 gram a day dose. Let's see. Anne is asking, have you ever had someone take creatine have symptoms they describe as withdrawal symptoms, like their nerves are on fire or hypersensitive? No, I haven't ever seen that happen in people with creatine usage. It's not to say it couldn't be the case for someone. I'm more than suspecting creatine causing that symptom, though, and I would suspect the fillers in the creatine. A lot of creatine products have garbage in them. The artificial sweeteners, which are known causes of nerve pain and nerve hypersensitivity type symptoms. But a lot of them also have, GMO corn syrups and other things as filling agents so that when you mix it with water, it has flavor. I'm a fan of just the pure creatine monohydrate, nothing added. When you take it with water and drink it. So it wouldn't surprise me if your symptoms, if you've experienced that there was probably some filler in that product. That's not to say, everybody has their own unique experience. So let's see here. Chandra, I'm going on 60. I don't eat meat or fish. Should I take creatine if I don't lift weights? Sometimes I do aerobics. Well, if you sometimes do aerobics, I would say, Chandra, why aren't you exercising? Even if you're not lifting weights, you should have some type. Maybe you do some things. Maybe you do yoga. Maybe you do Pilates. Maybe you do something else that's non-weight machine, non-weight bearing, but you should be doing something. And should you take creatine if you're on a plant-based diet? It's not a bad idea. Again, creatine is an important energetic substance that gives your muscles extra energy and longevity. So, but I would really say, can you take it and can you benefit from it? Probably, but should you be exercising? Probably yes. Let's see here. Stacy says, how much creatine for a 53-year-old female who has not gone through menopause yet, lost significant muscle mass during a couple of years of illness, repair dosing for duration or rebuilding muscles? I mean, as far as dosing, 53-year-old female, 3 to 5 grams a day consistently over time is a good place or range to start. And certainly you could do a loading dose as well. I'm a fan of the loading dose. I've come back from the, the 90s, the early 90s, late 80s, bodybuilding. And we used to we always loaded creatine. But if so it just depends on the scope of how fast you want a result. My experience, my opinion, loading gets you there faster. Not loading is still effective, but takes a little bit longer to start seeing some of those results showing up. But yes, creatine would be effective, and I'd say if you're not doing a loading dose and you're trying to rebuild your frame, rebuild your muscle, I'd push on that upper range of the creatine, so that 5 grams a day versus 3, until you get stable where you want to be, and then if you want to just do a maintenance dosing of it, 3 grams a day is okay. Harry says, Doctor O, do you take on patients? Yes, you can reach out to my office, Harry. I'll drop in the chat box. I'll drop the phone number to my office. We're booking out quite a ways, but you're more than welcome to be, to get signed up. I think we're booking out right now about 5 or 6 months, but I also have an associate, Dr. Driscoll, who has openings in his schedule much sooner than that. Is this live? Of course, yeah, this is live. When are particular amino acids more beneficial, and when is an amino acid blend more beneficial? Depends on which amino acids you're talking about, and it depends on what your goals are and what you're trying to accomplish. So, as an example, one of the reasons I love to test, Melinda, we test amino acids in people because we want to know the answer to that question you just asked. Which ones are we low in? And by knowing that answer, then we know which ones we should be focused on and taking. Now, sometimes when I see tests come back and someone has just a whole plethora of amino acid deficiencies, so they're just deficient across the board, I'll use a blend because it saves that individual from having to swallow, 15 to 20 pills a day. And I'll use a blend that's powder, so we'll mix it in water or make a smoothie with it, and this way it saves them pills, but also provides multiple amino acids. That's why we have a product. And those of you that don't know, our storefront's glutenfreesociety.org, and that's where we carry our product line. So if you're looking for high quality supplements, looking for high quality gluten-free, grain-free products, including amino acids, I encourage you to go check that site out. But Ultra Aminos is the name of the multi-blend amino acid product that we have, and it contains a beautiful ratio of the essential amino acids that will help your body, basically help support your body's amino acid needs. And I'll put a link up there for all of you. If you haven't visited Gluten Free Society, you can go check that out. And of course, we appreciate any of your support if you're using our products. It's always thankful. We've got behind these scenes, we've got more than 12 people that are making all of this happen for you. I get to be the front of it all, and you guys get to see me, but we've got a lot of folks behind us helping us make this happen and bringing knowledge and education to you every week. Hi, Dr. O. What are natural treatments for bacterial or nasal infections? That's a question from, I want to mangle your name. I apologize in advance. Deganit, D-G-A-N-I-T, Deganit. Well, first of all, let me just say, this show is not about treatment or diagnosis. This show is about education. So I can't really tell you how to treat your infection. But I can tell you that there are definitely some natural things that will support your body's immune system and your body's ability to balance out your microbial system. So, or your microbiome, so to speak. So, with that being said, if you're talking about in the sinus cavities, some of my favorite things are silver, ionized silver. I also like grapefruit seed extract. I also like essential oils with neti pots. So if you've got a neti pot, you take your neti pot and you add your saline solution, and then subsequently from there you can add a couple of drops of essential oil, Thyme, oregano are both good in this regard. So there's a lot of different natural agents that have antimicrobial impact. And so those are all good options. Thoughts on the use of compounded cholestyramine for mycotoxin illness, ochratoxin A, after my house mold is removed? I have a level of okay, so your ochratoxin A is 34 on your test. That's pretty high. I'm not a fan of cholestyramine. Let me explain why, Lynn. And thanks for asking your question. I know there are a lot of doctors that really stand behind cholestyramine as the only thing you should use. I just don't share that opinion. And here's why. Cholestyramine is a quaternary ammonia product. It's a synthetic chemical that has an affinity for your bile. So it binds your bile. Now, bile is important. It is important for the absorption of fat. Predominantly, though, if we're talking about beyond fat, we're talking about the absorption of vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, vitamin K, as well as omega-3s. And when you take high doses of cholestyramine for long periods of time, you cause fat malabsorption. And so these types of patients end up malnourished. And you have to understand that to control, and when we talk about CIRS, chronic inflammatory response syndrome, which is probably what somebody's diagnosed you with, you're talking about chronic inflammation. And these fat-soluble vitamins and nutrients are essential for your body's ability to regulate inflammation. So taking a substance for long periods of time at high doses that impede their absorption, in my opinion, isn't the best way forward. Now, cholestyramine is fantastic at binding mycotoxins, but so too is charcoal and zeolite and bentonite. So those are options that are natural that will not cause vitamin deficiencies. If you're going to use cholestyramine with your doctor, because some people, that's where they settle and they want to do that. It's not me judging you. You should make damn sure that your doctor is monitoring your vitamins, your vitamin A, D, E, and K, and your omega-3. If they're not, in my opinion, they're being irresponsible with what they're recommending. So, but I would much rather use natural binders, even if it takes a little bit longer, than to use cholestyramine because of the side effects of cholestyramine. I mean, bile is a pretty important substance. We don't want to negate our bile, but we do want to get ochratoxin A out of you. Now, how else can you get ochratoxin A out of you? Because you can poop it out, with binders like cholestyramine. It'll bind it in your intestine and it'll help you poop it out. But you can sweat it out. You can pee it out. So what do we need to do there to support our body's ability to detox through the sweat and through the urine? Well, sweating, exercise is one. Exercise without air conditioning is going to induce deep sweat, and it's going to help your body get rid of these toxins. When you're, so when you're thinking about your detox, if you have access to infrared as a sauna, that's one way to do it. Depending on the time of the year, laying outside in the sun where it's hot and you can sweat naturally that way, that's another good way to do it. Plus that vitamin D production by the sunlight on your skin and that infrared exposure to your mitochondria enhances detoxification and enhances energy production by your cells. So it's like a wonderful free medicine being outside. And then there's urination. But to get mycotoxins out of you, ideally you want to biotransform them. And what that means is you want to convert these toxins, they're fat soluble. You want to convert them from being fat soluble to being water soluble so that they're easily excreted by your kidneys. And that requires liver support. So, there are a number of different things that help the liver do that. Lipoic acid, glutathione, N-acetylcysteine, silymarin or milk thistle, calcium D-glucarate. These are all great things that you can take to support your liver's transformation of fat-soluble mycotoxins into water-soluble so that you can pee them out more readily. So it's not just about binding them out through the intestine. It's just a lot of doctors will tell you that you have to do that. Again, my opinion, I don't do it, and it's not something I recommend because I don't, first do no harm is kind of where I fall. Let's see here. You said, that's more of a comment. Can you recommend a good test for heavy metals? Pre-post urine provocation. Very simple. Urinary collection first thing in the morning, followed by chelating agents. There are a number of different chelating agents that you can take orally. chelating agents bind metal from your tissue so that you can excrete them out through your urine, which is where we're trying to measure them. So pre-provocation is the first morning urine collection. The post-provocation is taking chelators followed by a 6-hour urine collection to measure what's coming out of you. And so that combination is probably one of the most effective ways to look at heavy metals. There are other ways to look at it as well. There's, you can look at heavy metals that are stored inside of red blood cells. So there's something called a red blood cell elemental metal test that can be measured. But I like pre-post provocation for its consistent accuracy in my experience. Let's see. You said to take tyrosine early in the day because it may give you energy. Is this the same with other amino acids? No, not necessarily. Tyrosine is just one that people, if side effect wise, if you take it, some people get a little more energetic and even to the point of a little bit of anxiety, like super high energy. And if you take that at night, that may be contraindicated for a good night's sleep. But other amino acids don't generally tend to have that same effect. So it's not like all amino acids are best taken at night. So one of my favorite times to take amino acid blend is right after my workout. And even during my workout, like I will take something, we have a product called Ultra Aminos, and I will mix that in with my electrolyte water and I'll sip on that through my workout. And that way I'm just getting a steady flow of amino acids during my workout. And then after my workout is when I'll take my creatine, my 5 grams of creatine. The creatine I have says it's micronized and it is the only listed ingredient. Is it normal for it not to dissolve? And where does this powder come from? I don't know. I don't know what brand you're using, so I can't comment on what their source of creatine is. But creatine is not water soluble, so it does not dissolve in water. And so you have to stir it really, really well or blend it really, really well and drink it. And sometimes there's a little bit of residual in the bottom of the glass. And so you add a little bit more water and swirl it around and try to kick the rest back. So it's definitely normal for it not to absorb into the water. What carbohydrate types, e.g. potatoes, do you recommend for healthy metabolism and how much? It's not any particular. It's different for the individual, Andre. So you might have somebody who's reactive to nightshades, and so potato would be a terrible choice for them. You might have someone who's got a yeast overgrowth, and so if you pump them full of even whole fresh fruit, it's feeding the yeast overgrowth in their intestines, and that's a bad thing. So it depends on the individual, depends on the situation. Whole food carbohydrates, real whole food, non-grain carbohydrates are healthy, minus the nuance of what a person's reactions are or what their underlying situation might be. As far as quantity is concerned, I'm a big fan of balance, right? All things that we look at from a scientific perspective, every time we look at something through the lens of science and we try to enhance it or modify it, it's usually we create imbalance because a lot of people have the mentality that more, if some is good, more must be better. And so then with that attitude or mentality, they drive themselves into an imbalance. And I think that God created carbs, fats, and proteins, and that we should strive to eat them. Based on how our body responds to them, you should listen to how your body responds as well. But I'm a big fan of balance, so I follow what I like to call the rule of thirds. And this is not, you don't have to get out of a scale every day to measure everything. I know a lot of you take things sometimes literally so far that it creates stress. Don't do that. But you should seek balance. If your total calories in the day is 1,500 calories, then 500 of those calories coming from carbohydrates would be perfectly fine. When you get in trouble with an abundance of carbs is when you get into that 50+% of your total caloric daily values of carbohydrates or more. Now you're driving things like diabetes. You're feeding the microbiome abnormally. You remember certain species and strains in your microbiome that are there, like Candida, will thrive on excessive carbohydrates. So you want to make sure that you're feeding your body, but you're not feeding the imbalance. So a third is a good place to start. I know there's keto diets, and there's carnivore diets, and there's everything else in between that people swear by, but Like, I've been doing this for 24 years in practice, seeing patients and taking care of people and measuring these things meticulously in biochemistry. And most people fall really well within that guideline once they're healthy. Okay. Dahlia, hi, Dr. Osborne. I have ulcerative colitis. I've had an ulcerative colitis flare, and for the first time, I'm also having muscle pain in my calves, shins, forearms, possibly C. diff. But I have pain in my arms and legs. Well, when you have ulcerative colitis flares, one of the things that is happening is your gut's leaking, right? So inflammatory bowel disease. So you've got microscopic perforations in your intestines that are allowing the contents of your GI tract to leak across into your bloodstream. And if you do have C. diff, again, I would confirm that with your doctor. But if you do have C. diff produces different types of toxins. These toxins now that are, would be isolated into your gut lumen and come out through your stool are now allowed to penetrate and permeate into your bloodstream, and they can get systemic. They go systemic, and they can traverse to your muscular tissues and create inflammatory pain in your nerves, your muscles, your joints. It's a very common side effect. So that's possibly why. Now, there are other reasons. There may be other things going on, but that's a really common thing when we have inflammatory bowel disease. The microbes that are helping to drive it produce endotoxins called lipopolysaccharides. These are toxins that, again, absorb into your bloodstream and create inflammation, and they can traverse into your muscles and cause them to hurt. Do you recommend digestive enzymes with the evening high protein and carb meal? I don't. Well, one, I didn't recommend a high protein, high carb meal in the evening. But if you're eating that in the evening, maybe there's a barrier, a language barrier. Could you take digestive enzymes to support your digestion? Sure. I don't take digestive enzymes with all my meals, but I do have people that see me where that is my recommendation based on the fact that we've tested them and their pancreas is underperforming. It's not making adequate digestive enzymes, and their guts maybe are inflamed. And so they're not working or playing with a full functional deck of health. And so digestive enzymes can be very supportive in these individuals. I had a complete hysterectomy recently, including the ovaries. Would it be beneficial to take DHEA? Maybe. Ask your doctor to measure your DHEA and DHEAS levels. To help you to determine that. As a woman, you don't want to overdose on DHEA. It will cause hair loss and acne and facial hair growth if your dose is too high. So with DHEA, it's one of the few things I would say definitely in a supplement world, get that one tested ideally and measure it. Generally, women do well with anywhere between 5 and 25 grams of DHEA a day when they're low, and some are more sensitive to it than others. So that just has to be played out when you use it. Let's see. Jason says, hello, doctor. I suffered muscle loss and weight loss 3 years ago when my doctor put me on mega doses of statin. Because my cholesterol ended up being a bad lab. Will creatine help rebuild my muscle? Yeah, I mean, if you use it with working out, I don't think taking creatine by itself is just gonna magically rebuild your muscle passively. I think, but the addition of creatine with exercise, you're definitely going to get a boost in growth and recovery from statin-induced myopathies. And hopefully you stay away from those statins. To me, that's like the biggest trick ever played on the population is cholesterol. That whole thing is just it's an atrocious train wreck, in my opinion. Let's see here. Lorraine Kruger, what is the best diet, in your opinion, for someone with stage 3 kidney disease? There's not a best diet for somebody with stage 3 kidney disease. Lorraine, you have to ask the question, why does the person have stage 3 kidney disease? What's driving it? What are they doing that's damaged their kidneys to the level that they're losing functionality? And then if that includes foods, like for example, we see very commonly gluten damaging the kidneys, then you got to change the diet. But if you don't have a gluten sensitivity, then going gluten-free may not do anything for your kidney problem, right? So you have to ask the fundamental question. So what are the primary drivers of inflammation in the kidneys? Food, chemicals, microbes, and nutritional deficits are the four things that I would encourage you to get measured so that you have a better understanding of what changes uniquely, what dietary changes, lifestyle changes you need to make as a unique person to support your kidney health. All righty, let's see. I've been doing 5 grams of creatine for a long time. Seems to work for me. Thanks for sharing, Jamie. Is creatine safe for those with CKD? Yes. I talked about that on Tuesday, Lorraine. The studies on creatine and kidney function are perfectly fine. It's perfectly safe for people with chronic kidney disease to take reasonable amounts of creatine. That's 5 grams a day or less. Without any concern about it being problematic or creating or causing kidney disease. What you have to be careful of because what happens, Lorraine, when doctors measure kidney function, a lot of times they rely on a test called the blood urea nitrogen or BUN test. They also look at your creatinine levels, which isn't the same thing as creatine. And then they look at your GFS, your glomerular filtration rate, which is an estimated number. And so, for example, a higher protein diet creates a shift in creatinine and BUN, usually upward. And kidney doctors freak out about that. And they think, oh my gosh, your kidney function is worsening because your BUN and your creatinine are going up. But higher protein diets can do that. And it doesn't mean that it's damaging your kidneys. So you got to be careful too with the doctor that you choose to work with, because a lot of them can mislead you. I've seen this over and over again where they put patients they take them off of all animal protein, put them on plant-based diets because they're worried that the nitrogen from animal-based proteins is damaging their kidney. But that doesn't happen. That's not true. Protein doesn't damage the kidney. Damaged kidneys leak protein. And it's not the same thing. It's a guilt by association complex that far too often doctors mislead people down the wrong road. And if you go no animal protein, you're going to cause severe malnutrition in your body. If you're trying to recover from a chronic inflammatory disease, you're going to create a hurdle nutritionally for your body to be able to recover. Have you had success with MS? Yes, definitely. MS is one of those, especially if you're catching it early. It's very responsive to diet and lifestyle and nutritional changes. And can creatine help with MS? Yeah, it can. Again, it doesn't help with the MS. It helps with the symptoms that MS can contribute to. So creatine can help with muscle strength and muscle energetics, but it's not going to reverse an MS situation. But it can be helpful symptomatically. MS is an autoimmune condition of demyelinating nerves, and so there are a lot of different triggers there for MS. Gluten is a major trigger in my experience with people with MS, but so too is vitamin D deficiency and vitamin B12 deficiency. And so looking at those things, among others, would be, in my opinion, an extremely important first step into trying to understand why a person is struggling with that condition. I had severe inflammation in the urethra. I'm on medication for it. What causes that? Lots of things. You could have had a bacterial UTI. That's a possibility. And there's lots of, it doesn't have to be bacterial either. It could be fungal. I've seen fungal urinary tract issues and kidney issues. So it just depends. Sometimes people have high oxalate diets, especially with chronic kidney disease. Their doctor said, eat all the plants, but don't eat any beef. Don't eat any animal meats. And so then they go load up on plants, greens, and their oxalate levels are driven way through the roof. And then your kidneys have to deal with all that excess oxalate, and it's damaging your kidneys and damaging your urethra. And then you end up with inflammation. So, you got to get definitive testing to try to determine why. Test, don't guess. Would taking creatine change or alter any blood or lab tests? It it could affect your creatine kinase, but that's not a typical lab test that the doctors order. It's typically a specialized lab. If you're having mysterious muscle pains, or if the doctor thinks that they're trying to figure out why you might have neurological damage or heart damage, they're tests called creatine kinase isoenzyme tests. And so taking creatine might affect those, but that's about it. My 6-year-old son has juvenile dermatomyositis. His muscles are super tight and his legs and arms will not go straight. Do you think creatine will help? Might help him feel a little bit better, but it isn't going to resolve the juvenile dermatomyositis. That's not, I mean, dermatomyositis isn't, I don't know what you were told. I know my experience in the rheumatology department, when I used to work in a VA hospital, was patients were told that it was genetic and that they need to be on medicine indefinitely. That was what we were taught as interns. Now, the reality in private practice experience is most cases of dermatomyositis are diet and environmental chemically induced. And so you've got to figure those two pieces out. That's just my opinion, including in 6-year-olds. So ask your doctor to measure for food sensitivities, for food allergies. Ask them to measure for chemical exposures, and rule those things out. And then get a good, solid nutritional workup where you're measuring the different nutrients, especially with dermatomyositis, CoQ10, and vitamin D and vitamin C. I've seen cases where kids had diagnoses of that condition, and it was really nothing more than scurvy. I had a case once, it's vitamin C deficiency mimicking dermatomyositis, but the doctors don't test for vitamin C. They don't test for really typically any vitamins. And so here this kid was on strong doses of steroids to control the condition, when all the kid needed was some vitamin C at higher doses. So anyway, that's just an example. I'm not saying that's what your son's situation is, but measure. In your experience, does consuming potatoes increase small particle LDL or oxidized LDL? No, and I wouldn't really worry about LDL as a total anyway. LDL, bad LDL. So when we talk about small particle LDL, won a Nobel Prize for the discovery that it was necessary to form brain synapses. So all these doctors that are attacking LDL and claiming that it's the worst thing, and that you'll have a heart attack if you don't lower it. How do you explain that people with higher LDL live longer? How do you explain that bad LDL is necessary to form brain synapses? How do you explain that LDL helps your body make testosterone and estrogen and progesterone? I just can't get around those thought processes of so many that are out there demonizing that compound. Is creatine safe for someone who has hypothyroidism or is on Synthroid? Yeah, Lori, I actually talked about a case study in the medical literature of a patient who had a thyroidectomy. They had actually had their thyroid was removed, and the medicine, the Synthroid they were on, was actually causing pain for them. And that the solution to that, because they couldn't get off the thyroid medicine because they didn't have a thyroid anymore, but the solution that these doctors found for that person's pain was creatine. In essence, taking the creatine alleviated the Synthroid-induced muscle myalgia, muscle pain in this particular case. And so is there contraindication for taking Synthroid and taking creatine? No, but Synthroid is to be taken on an empty stomach. So don't take them at the same time, but you certainly can take them at different times and be just fine. I've been to a holistic doctor where I was told to stay away from gluten, soy, and dairy. I've been eating gluten-free, grain-free for 1 month. Do you have a list of soaps? Not really. And the reason why, Tina, we used to, but the companies sell and change their ingredients so frequently that I didn't have enough people to keep up with the mass changeover of ingredients. But I would tell you that Castile and glycerin soaps are generally real safe as far as, like grain-free soaps. And then as far as, deodorant, there's a brand, Each and Every, is a good grain-free deodorant brand. Shampoos and conditioners, there's a number of brands. You just have to be careful and read your labels, read your ingredient labels. What would you say, Chris says, what would you say is the time frame to see results? If you don't notice results, should you increase the dose or look for a higher quality? I would always start with a higher quality. Don't start with a lower quality. You get what you pay for. In the supplement world, you absolutely get what you pay for. If you're paying low prices, it's because whoever's producing that product, typically, not always, but typically, they're cutting corners, they're lying about their label claims, and that's why they can sell it to you for less. But real solid quality products cost money. Just like with anything else in life, you get what you pay for. So back to your question, though. If you're not noticing results, the time frame, I would say depends on what you're looking for, right? With creatine, if you're looking for increased energy and increased strength, you're going to notice results probably in 4 to 5 weeks, pretty typically. That's pretty typical. Some people even as soon as 2 to 3. But that varies, again, depending on the dose you're taking, loading, also depending on a number of other factors, right? As I mentioned earlier, you need to make creatine, you need other nutrients. So, I mean, this is why when you take creatine, you kind of bypass those things. But to utilize creatine, for your body to use creatine, that byproduct of increased energy could mean increased muscle soreness, which could mean you need to increase your protein along with it to repair and recover from those exercises, etc. So there's a lot of variable in that, but I would shoot for 3 to 6 weeks as a general, looking to see some change and some improvement. I like this comment. Lisa says, my son has been using creatine to bulk up for the last year and it works. But could this be dangerous? What happens if you stop taking it? It's not dangerous. Creatine's been around over 30 years, actually almost 50 years. I think in the 70s was when it really started to come into use. Don't quote me on that because I don't remember exactly when it happened, but it's been around 50 years and it's arguably the most effective ergogenic supplement ever. And the research backs that. And it's the safest. There's no, people don't flood into poison control or the emergency room because creatine causes kidney damage or problems. Go back and review my Tuesday show. I talked about, some of the creatine myths. But creatine's very safe. And if you stop taking it, that's fine too. You can stop taking it. There's not a consequence that's negative if you stop taking it, unless you're like taking it to try to, help with pain. Your pain might return or something along that line. But if you're just taking it for exercise enhancements or benefits, the only negative consequence of maybe stopping to take it would be you might see, some of those benefits that you reaped from it start to diminish over time. But again, that's not a danger to your physiology. Well, let's see. Kimberly says, I just want to say thank you, Dr. Osborne, for answering my question and concern about a CT scan for polyp in my sinuses. I'm reducing it with castor oil. Even the ENT admitted it works. All right. I love it. I'm glad that that information was helpful for you, Kimberly. And thanks kindly for your contribution. I really appreciate you. Let's see here. Urine mycotoxins positive. Do need charcoal and fiber to cleanse, or will my body detox itself? Your body will always detox itself to a certain extent. And one of the core issues with mycotoxins is something called enterohepatic trapping, where they do get stuck between your liver and your intestines, which is why we like to use binders like charcoal, and fiber's good too as a natural option. So it's not a bad idea to use those things. Now, if you're going to use them very long term, like many, many months, it's important to monitor your nutrition because the carbon from charcoal is a binder, and it can bind mycotoxins, but it can also bind your minerals. And so you don't want to take it indefinitely and drive a mineral deficiency or reduction in absorption of minerals from the food that you're eating, because that could lead to other problems for you. So if you're going to use those things longer term, I just encourage you to get your intracellular nutrition analysis done during that framework, so that you're staying abreast of your nutritional needs. Will creatine supplementation cause retention of water, causing high blood pressure at all? I've never seen a case, Jason, of creatine-induced elevations in blood pressure. Creatine doesn't increase water retention in your bloodstream. It draws water into your muscle. So it's hydrating the muscle. And generally, when you hydrate the muscle, you're not going to see an elevation in blood pressure on the vascular, on the vascular tree or the periphery of the blood vessel wall. So it's not something that generally I would say would cause that. Now, there may be unique experiences that people have had, but it's not anything I've seen ever happen to anyone that I've ever put on creatine driving their blood pressure up. As a matter of fact, typically what happens is when people take creatine, it also motivates their exercise and their activity. So more frequently, what we see is that blood pressure goes down. Muscle hydration goes up, blood pressure goes down. I try to limit arginine due to cold sores. Will creatine affect this or increase the risk? No. Now, arginine, yes, for sure. Arginine interferes or has an interfering effect with lysine, and lysine is one of the things, amino acids, that keeps keeps cold sores in check. That's why so many over-the-counter remedies for cold sores, the primary ingredient in them is lysine. Lysine inhibits herpes virus replication. And so predominantly cold sores are caused as a result of herpes simplex type 1 viruses. So when you take arginine, you imbalance that arginine-lysine ratio, you can definitely drive up the risk, but creatine not. Creatine makes me retain so much water, I get stiff and it slows my urination. What could this be a sign of in regards to my health? It's too complex of a question. I mean, there could be a number of variable factors that are going on. I mean, I don't know how much you're taking. I don't know how long you took it before you saw those symptoms. I don't know anything about your history or diet. So it's really hard to understand what else may be going on with that. It's because it's not at all a likely symptom of creatine supplementation. It's what you're describing is a very unique side effect that is definitely not common. Now, that being said, I'm not dismissing that you're having them or trying to gaslight you at all. It's just my experience. But, you might consider getting with a good functional doc and getting some testing done to see if there may be something else going on that is causing that. Is it best to take glycine on an empty stomach? If your glycine is low and you're trying to build your glycine levels back up, yeah, probably. Now you could take it with fruit and that would be fine, because there's no real amino acids in fruit. There's no quantitative high levels of protein in fruit. So when you take amino acids as individual supplements, generally the best way to take them is away from heavy amounts of other proteins. So I don't take it with a hamburger, don't take it with a steak. Take it on an empty stomach with a glass of water, or take it with something that's carbohydrate based as opposed to protein based. I've got joint pains and fatigue. Would creatine be best for me to start with the gluten-free bundle I just ordered? I ordered the vanilla protein powder too. I mean, you definitely could. You could start creatine and see if it helps you. Hopefully, Tina, too, you're on your path to gluten-free, and you're going to see gluten playing a role in some relief for your joint pain as well. I'm starting to lift weights, 63, with osteoporosis. Should I go up on creatine after a certain amount of time? No, just start taking it. I mean, you don't have to wait a certain amount of time. I mean, if I'm going to work out, because if I've got bone loss and I'm going to work out to try to enhance my bone integrity and increase my bone density, I'm on creatine. Boom, done. I'm on creatine because I want my workouts to be more effective. Remember what creatine does during weight resistance. Creatine allows you an extra 1 to 2 reps per set in your workouts. Now, if you're doing, just depending on the types of workouts that you're doing. But generally, most people, when they go to the gym to exercise, they're going to do at least anywhere from 3 to 6 types of exercises, right? And generally, it's some patternistic approach, like 3 sets of 10 reps or 3 sets of 8 reps, or whatever it might be per exercise. So what I'm telling you is creatine gets you, from a strength perspective, an extra 1 to 2 repetitions per set. So if you're doing 18 sets among 4 or 5 different types of exercises, you're in effect you're going to squeak out an extra 20 to 30 reps, which you multiply that by 6 months. It doesn't sound like much for a single day, but you multiply that by 6 months and the growth potential is very good. Excuse me. Let's see. If you have deficiencies of certain nutrients needed to utilize the creatine, can it accumulate in your organs? No, because it's not that there are certain nutrients needed to utilize the creatine. It's more that if you're making your own and not supplementing creatine, you need certain nutrients to make creatine. But the utilization of creatine is an energy substrate that's stored. 95% of it is stored in your muscle. It's not so much that you need the nutrients to utilize the creatine, it's you need the nutrients to make the creatine. But if you're taking supplemental creatine, that doesn't so much apply. But if you're taking supplemental creatine and your workouts are longer and harder and stronger, then you're going to need better recovery nutrients, right? Because when you damage your muscle tissues and they have to go back and heal, and that's what we call the soreness after a workout. Like, you need more antioxidants. You need things like vitamin C and B vitamins and protein to recover from the damage of the exercise. Remember, exercise causes a damage. It's not. When I say damage, don't think of it in a negative way or a negative connotation. It's what we call hormetic stress, beneficial stress. Exercise is beneficial stress. But if you're doing it on a consistent basis and you want to minimize your downtime and enhance your recovery, it's those nutrients that help you recover when you're working out harder. But creatine doesn't accumulate in tissues, right? Again, super safe. Creatine of all supplements, from a sports ergogenic aid perspective, very safe. And so it's not something that I think any of you need to have any real significant fears. And if your doctor's telling you that's dangerous, I would press them. If a doctor told me that creatine is dangerous for you, I would press them, and I would press them to explain the biochemistry of why it's dangerous. Because what ultimately would happen is that doctor would have no clue. They're just parroting danger without the knowledge. Typically, that's the case for most doctors when they're trying to frown upon your nutrition protocol. Now, don't get me wrong, there's some doctors that are trained in nutrition and have good knowledge, but the vast majority don't. Do you think a brain MRI with no contrast is dangerous? No, especially if you're trying to get information that pertains to how to proceed with your health. But MRIs are generally real safe. What I don't like are CAT scans because of just the extent of the radiation. There's a lot of radiation in a CAT scan, and they're not always necessary. Sometimes an MRI is perfectly fine and you don't need the CAT scan. And then the contrast, I would never put that garbage in my body. That's just my opinion. If doctor wanted me to do an MRI and do any kind of contrast at all, I would say no. But I would do an MRI. I have kidney disease, and when I took creatine, it affected my creatinine labs, and my rheumatologist wanted me to stop it. It's an artificial elevation. It's not an elevation because your kidneys are damaged. If you're really concerned about your kidneys, you should do additional testing with your cystatin C, Amy. There's a test called cystatin C. It's a more accurate indicator of kidney function than creatinine and BUN. The other thing you can look at is your protein in your urine and your microalbumin coming out in your urine. If you really want to know whether or not there's problem in your kidneys, those tests are going to start showing up abnormal. But creatinine can be affected by your diet. I mean, increases in protein can affect it as well. So it's just not something that I would make a decision on. based on purely a creatinine lab test. Again, creatine does not affect kidney function. It affects kidney labs, which isn't the same thing because it's just the same analogy. If you take iodine and you get your thyroid hormone levels measured, the iodine is going to artificially elevate your TSH. It's not that your TSH is actually elevated, it's an artificial elevation. And it's the same thing here with creatinine. It's not that your creatinine is measuring your kidneys being damaged more aggressively because you're taking creatine. It's a flaw of the test. And anyway, I hope that's helpful for you. I would consider getting a second opinion. Jamie says, how much creatine do you take? I take 5 grams a day personally, and have been for a long time. Can the amino acids help with hair loss from nutritional deficiencies? Yes, they can. It just depends. It depends on why you're having hair loss. I mean, there's autoimmune hair loss, and so taking amino acids may not correct an autoimmune hair loss like alopecia areata. But if your hair loss is as a consequence of you being protein malnourished after celiac disease, yeah, absolutely. Remember, your hair is made of protein, and your protein is made of amino acids. And if your amino acid levels are low, your body doesn't have enough of its raw ingredients to synthesize hair effectively and efficiently, that can translate into hair thinning and hair loss. So it's very possible that amino acids can be beneficial in that regard. I have coconut allergy and a sensitivity to salicylates. Taking D3K2, magnesium, and choline. Any suggestions for cooking oils? How about just tallow? Beef tallow, duck fat would be good options. Avocado oil may be a good option for you as well. So consider those. Can creatine still be beneficial for traumatic brain injury years after the fact? So you had traumatic brain injury, let's say 5 years ago. Is creatine still going to benefit you in that aspect? Hard to say. I haven't taken on any cases personally, Aaron, where we had a TBI historically where we specifically targeted creatine to try to improve, cognitive function or neurological function. Worth a try, I would say. There's not a danger to it. Try it and come back and let us know. Do it for a month and come back, and if it helped to change you in any way or gave you any benefits, let us know and share. Together as a community, we can answer questions in real time. So I would encourage you to go do that and then come back and report your personal findings. Thoughts on oil of oregano for Candida overgrowth? It's a good question. It can be effective. It can also be absolutely ineffective. When in my practice, Stacy, we do what's called culture sensitivity testing. So if we find Candida overgrowth, we also take that person's Candida and subject it to different things like oregano and thyme and uva ursi and caprylic acid, etc. Because we want to know for the person what is most effective to neutralize their Candida. So whereas oregano, historically has very fantastic antifungal properties, it may work just fine for you. But I see a lot of times when we do cultures that and we test that strain on that the person has for oregano effectiveness, a lot of these Candida species, in my experience, have a resistance to oregano. So does yours? I don't know. It's one of those. That's why I do a culture sensitivity, because I'm trying to really figure out what's the best move for the person with the issue. Is it okay to put creatine in hot beverages? You can, but it's not like you've probably never taken creatine. Because if you put creatine in a hot beverage, creatine is not going to dissolve. Creatine is not water soluble. So it's going to make drinking that beverage uncomfortable. The best way, in my opinion, to take creatine is 5 grams in a cup, 3 ounces or so of water. Stir it really, really well. As the water is still spinning and stirring in the cup, kick that 3 ounces back as quickly as you possibly can. The way I view a hot beverage is a nice, slow, enjoyable sip. And remember, creatine, within 30 seconds, that stuff is going to settle to the bottom of the glass. And so putting in a hot beverage, if the beverage is hot enough, you're probably not going to guzzle that down and burn your throat. So it's just not probably the best way to drink creatine. I can't remember, but is creatine in your amino acids? No, it isn't in my amino acids, and creatine is not an amino acid. Creatine is produced by amino acids, glycine, and arginine, and methionine donates a methyl group to it. But creatine itself is not, a free-form amino acid. Yeah, so I just read an article that creatine is being studied for depression and Parkinson's disease. The animal studies for creatine and Parkinson's disease look pretty good. I think there's a few human case studies that aren't, humans, animal studies and mouse studies and human studies don't always translate. But there have been studies on cognitive function and depression in humans, smaller scale, that pretty good results. My mom was just diagnosed with lung cancer. What dosage of creatine would you recommend in general? 5 grams a day. Again, that's a good starting place for pretty much anyone. Very safe. What can you do for ringing in your ears? Depends on what's causing it. I mean, I've seen ringing in the ears be caused by parasites, vitamin B deficiencies, mineral deficiencies can contribute to ringing in the ears. Ear trauma, right? So no deficiencies, just have ear trauma. So it depends. It's a multifactorial problem. Actually, we're doing a show this year on tinnitus, so stay tuned for that, Tina, because we're going to be doing a deep dive on a lot of the mechanisms behind why it happens and what you can do. Hi, Dr. Osborne. I have a weird question, but can you smell mold? Musty smell on people? Does that skin give off a smell on clothes? Sometimes. I mean, I'll have sometimes when people come to me in my office and, I sit down across from them, like I'm already checking the lab order to measure mycotoxins because I can smell it on them. I mean, I was in mold for several years, and different molds have different smells. But what we had in our house, there were a couple different types. We had a kind of classic musty smell that was there, but we also had kind of a sweet, it had almost like a hint of sweet smell. And I pick that nuance up on a lot of people who are chronically sick, chronic pain, chronic fatigue syndromes, super common. So I can smell it on people, but I couldn't say that prior to my own mold exposure. Like I wasn't that in tune until I lived in it for 2 years and got sick. But now I think now my body's more akin to warning me about it. So I pick up on it a lot easier now. They're training dogs now to pick up on mold. I haven't had any experience directly with dogs actually being successful in finding mold, so I can't speak from experience in that regard. But I've come across a couple of folks who have have been training their dogs to identify mold. I think it's a really great and novel idea, and I think the power of the nose is something we should all endeavor to use to help navigate our environments. Do you need to hydrate more when taking creatine? I would. I mean, just because creatine is going to pull water into your muscles. And so I would definitely, I don't know that you need to, it depends on how much you're hydrating now. I'd say if you're drinking adequate amounts and you're fully hydrated already, you probably don't need to hydrate more. But if you're going into creatine already a little dehydrated, yeah, it's probably a pretty good idea to get that water in you. Trying to get my son off, he's 13, off of stimulant medication. Do you think he could benefit from creatine or other aminos? He lacks energy and focus. I mean, he may benefit. I would get him tested. If you were my son, I'd test his nutrition status to get better clarity around what might be helpful. But a lot of kids that are addicted to stimulant medications or hooked on them, a lot of the times B vitamin deficiencies can be very very problematic for the success of that outcome, because the Bs are important for energy production. And a lot of these kids that get hooked on stimulants, you got to remember stimulants, depending on which ones he's on, they burn through B vitamins. And like stimulants like caffeine or diuretics, so they cause the loss of B vitamins through excessive urination. And then you also get that certain stimulants can damage the gut lining, causing malabsorption. But you got to look at his diet. I'd say any kid that's been put on ADHD, ADD medicine, they got to look at the diet. I mean, the diets of kids, and God, we have an epidemic, and I'm going to try to say this as kindly as I can. We have an epidemic of ignorance. And it's not that I'm trying to say that everyone's stupid or dumb, because being stupid is different than being ignorant. And being ignorant is a lack of knowledge. Being stupid is having the knowledge, but ignoring it and doing the wrong thing anyway. So when I say ignorance, we have an epidemic of ignorant parents, ignorant teachers, who don't understand the importance of quality nutrition in their children. And that's why we have chronic epidemic illness in this country. And then we have an epidemic of misinformation, guised as good information, right? Because drugs don't cure disease. Kids don't have ADHD most of the time. What they have is they have a mismatch between their personalities, and the way school systems are set up to teach, or they have terrible nutrition and they just don't know it. I mean, I had a case a few months ago. A parent brought their child in to see me. Parents' first words were, I don't know what's going on because we eat really well. And when I start looking at their diet history, 8 out of the 10 food items were processed box foods, guised as health foods. And this parent truly believed that she was doing the right thing. To her credit, she was trying really hard, but the misinformation that's pumped, through commercialization and people trying to sell products that, aren't worth a damn, it gets confusing, right? Who do you trust, right? But the entire industry has betrayed us. And I think that's the message people don't want to hear. The CDC, the FDA, they've betrayed us. The food industry has betrayed us. The media has betrayed us because they're bought by the pharmaceutical industry, and the pharmaceutical industry has betrayed us. And the medical industry, the doctors and the hospital systems have betrayed us. Why? Because they're not our watchdogs anymore. They're not watching out for us. They're all paid industry shills. And if you're a parent and you've been trusting that for your child, trusting that information, you are under the impression you're doing it right. And you're under the impression that, that you're doing nothing wrong. Now, that's ignorance. It's not, and I don't blame the parents. I blame the unethical greed bags who all just want to profit off of our misery. But at the end of the day, our health is our responsibility. And if you're outsourcing it to all these agencies and all these strangers who are trying to sell you crap, wake up. You can't put your head in the sand. You have to take an active role, and you have to question where the information is coming from and what bias is behind that information that's profit driven, or otherwise driven in a way that's not meant to help you be healthy. And that's a hard thing to do, because what it means for a parent is you have to admit that you've been doing it wrong and go commit time, effort, and energy to re-educating yourself. It first requires the admittance of error. And a lot of people have a hard time humbling themselves when they're wrong. I do. We all do. So again, I think we have an epidemic of ignorance. That's why you're all here. You're here to try to get as much education as you can every week so that you can make better decisions and have better knowledge. But, when you got a 13-year-old on stimulant medications, the number one thing I would tell you should look into doing is getting nutritionally checked out, and changing the diet. And if you do that, probably the outcome is going to be fantastic, probably. But you've got to start with that. Beyond that, it's nuanced. Let's see. Do you find that you or your family or your patients are now much more aware of room building containing mold since you've recovered from it? Yes, absolutely. Not only are you more aware of it, I mean, your body kind of picks up on the nuance of the smells and things, but you're more diligent in your observation of the world around you. Like when I go into a grocery store, I'm looking up. I'm looking at ceiling tiles. When I go into a building, my nose is working and I'm looking around. I'm looking for signs of water damage. It's just what we in the mold community, we call it mold PTSD, right? It's once you've been in it and you've lost your house, lost your health, lost your pets, like you don't ever want to go through that again. It's miserable. And so you just are on the lookout for it so that you're minimizing your potential risk of exposure. Are you a fan of lymphatic, or are you a fan of rebounders for lymphatic drainage? Yeah, I think rebounders are great. It's a great low impact way to move your body. I've been on the carnivore diet 41 years, but I do eat eggs, yogurt, and cheese. You've been on the carnivore diet 41 years, but you do eat, I don't understand that because eggs are part of the carnivore diet. So I don't know, maybe rephrase your question. I don't know. Maybe it's just a comment, Rick. I don't know what you're trying to say. Stop weight gain 10 to 24 months. Let's see. That question's worded kind of strange. Baby, stop weight gain 10 to 24 months. At 20 months, had strep while on antibiotics for bacteria. Post-strep target lesions. Child symptoms look pandas. Now 30. Anything I can do to address this now? EDS, POTS, MCAS. Sounds like you just got a plethora of lifelong autoimmune struggles that you've dealt with, combined with strep infection and probably antibiotic use, which could potentially have decimated your microbiome, leaving it in disarray. And so these other things are kind of persisting. I would look at, getting tested, honestly. There's just a lot there going on. I'm super sensitive to fragrances and chemical smells. It started 8 years ago and seems to be getting worse. What could be causing this? Your bucket's full, Anna. When people start to develop multiple chemical sensitivity, it's because their body's overwhelmed or becoming more overwhelmed. And you need to really look into why. I go back to, the 4 primary driving triggers of autoimmune and of chronic inflammation, which is what fills your bucket: food, chemicals, microbes, and nutritional deficits. If you look into those 4 areas simultaneously and apply them, you empty your bucket and you become kind of better tolerant of a lot of things. And becoming tolerant of chemical smells doesn't mean you should be around them, though, either. Remember, your body's first warning sign, one of your body's first warning signs of danger is smell. So I would also say honor your body's messaging. It's trying to tell you that, stay away from that stuff. Does creatine need to be balanced with something else? A mineral, an amino acid, etc. I mean, could it cause some deficiency? No, again, I think I said this earlier. I think if you're using creatine and you're working out more aggressively, what really needs to be balanced are the side effects of the exercise, potentially increasing the demand for certain nutrients for recovery. So, get your nutrition status checked. That would be the best thing to do if you're really concerned about it. Best way to identify the cause and treat a goiter. David, watch my show I did a crash course on the thyroid. I mean, most goiters, in my experience, are nutritionally related. There's several different things that can drive it. I've seen gluten cause goiters. I've seen iodine deficiency cause goiters. I've seen iodine toxicity cause goiters. I've seen goitrogenic vegetarian diets cause goiters. I've seen selenium deficiency cause goiters. So it's not as simple as this one thing. Looking for nutritional triggers first would be a great place to start. Can taking creatine deplete other nutrients? I think I answered that one several times, so we'll skip it. I'm currently trying carnivore to heal from low-fat Toyota diets. Binging, restricting. Could I benefit from adding monohydrate, creatine monohydrate? Possibly. What are you trying to benefit from? Because I mean, that's where I can give you a better answer. What are you trying to benefit? I'm 63 with skin that tears easily on my arms. Years of sun damage. Will creatine cream help stop this? Probably not. You should look at increasing your protein, Thomas, because if you've got thin skin that tears easily, I would say it's not from years of sun damage. It's probably more from protein inadequacy. And the collagen, it thins as we age, but most people also reduce their protein intake as we age, and that's really a big driver of thinning of the skin for a lot of people. How do I take creatine on an empty stomach before workout in the morning? Is there any other better time to take it? The best take it after your workouts. Empty or not empty stomach, it doesn't really matter. 5 grams after a workout is the best time. So it depends on when you work out. There's not if you take it at night because you work out in the evening, that's fine. If you take it in the morning because you work out after or in the morning, that's fine. So there's not like a timing component to creatine minus, directly after a workout. Can you comment on the use of distilled vinegar with celiac disease since it might contain gluten? Yeah, I'm not a big fan of white vinegar unless the white vinegar can be verified that it's from cane, organic cane. But most white vinegar in the U.S. today is GMO corn. So I'm not a fan of that. I'm not a fan of any GMO products. So you got to check a lot of your condiments, right? Your mayos, your mustards, your ketchups, and things of that nature. What's a good brand of methylene blue? I'm not a fan of methylene blue. All you guys out there trying to take methylene blue to improve your energy, no offense to the person that asked the question, but in my opinion, barking up the wrong tree. Methylene blue is a dye derivative. And healthier people taking methylene blue can actually damage the mitochondria. So, this whole hype about methylene blue, I'm just not a fan. Now, there's some evidence that, people with chronic mitochondrial dysfunction might benefit in terms of energy production, but you don't have mitochondrial energy production problems because you have a methylene blue deficiency. At the end of the day, it's a synthetic chemical manipulation that is lying to you. You have to figure out the why, and the answer to the why is never going to be that your body's lacking methylene blue. That's my opinion on methylene blue. What are the symptoms of protein deficiency? Lots of them. I did a whole show on that, Melinda. Why don't you check out my protein crash course, where I do a deep dive on protein deficiency. But super common, quick symptoms: hair loss, probably one of the big ones; muscle aches, muscle pain, soreness, exercise intolerance, all pretty common. Is it safe to take 3 grams of creatine if you have mildly elevated creatinine? Yes. I don't take L-creatine, but I still do take 3,000 milligrams of taurine per day. It makes me extremely hungry over the day. Can both be taken at the same time? Yes. What do you think of raw milk? I think it's fine if you're not allergic to milk. I think it's fine if the cow that's producing the milk is an A2, genetically polled A2 cow. I think if you're doing A1 milk, I think there's some problems that come with A1 casein that are, potentially autoimmune stimulating. So I'm not a fan of milk from A1. I have bad gout in my hands. Is it okay to take amino acids? It can be, but figure out why you have the gout. A lot of times I've seen gout for a lot of people be manifest as a result of antioxidant deficiency, vitamin C deficiencies. Uric acid crystals are depositing in your hands. So you got to figure out the chemistry of why that's happening. So Mickey, I would really recommend you get with somebody and determine why that's happening. Soy boy, let's see. Yeah, I don't know. That's much a comment. If I eat a lot of protein, but my gut doesn't digest it all well, does it still count as lots of protein intake? Now, well, I mean, if you're not digesting it well and you're pooping out putrefied protein, it doesn't count. But if you may consider taking like a supplemental betaine hydrochloride or acid to support your digestion of protein. You might also consider using free-form amino acid supplements because they don't require the acid for the absorption so much because you don't have to break the protein down. But we have a product called Ultra Acid that is designed for people that want to eat more protein but have a harder time digesting it because of low stomach acid. Somebody says raw milk is the perfect food. I would argue raw milk is the perfect food for the animal that's baby animal that the parent animal is producing it for. So if you're a cow, raw milk is the perfect food for your new cow baby. But if you're a human, raw milk is not the perfect food necessarily, and for a lot of people can be a nightmare of a food. Just point of clarity. I definitely have a UTI for a week, for the past week. Can creatine help that? Probably not. It wouldn't be my first choice to support urinary flow. I would use D-mannose powder. We have something called UTI Relief. It's a powder that you can take. We also have something called UT Shield, which is an herbal. So in this type of case incidents, it really can help support urinary health and bladder health. Just got my vitamin D levels back. They're 87. Doctor says it's too high. It's not too high. I mean, what's the reference range for vitamin D? It's 20 to 100 on most labs, Dana. So if your doctor's saying doctors are so ignorant about nutrition. God, I wish they'd just quit commenting on it because it just confused the hell out of most people and scared them. I had a patient once. Their vitamin D levels was like 105. So it was a little bit on the higher side. It's 5 points high. They sent this patient to the emergency room for toxicity. And this patient wasn't symptomatic. They were going to their doctor for a checkup. That's the craziness that we've got. These people don't know what the hell they're doing when it comes to nutrition. And if they don't know what they're doing when it comes to nutrition, then they don't know what they're doing when it comes to health. It's like the blind leading the blind. Can creatine cause hyperactivity and anxiety? I've not seen that be a symptom. Now, it can increase energy, and increases in energy may be perceived as hyperactivity and anxiety, Mario. And so, but not like pathological anxiety. I'd say if you're taking it on days where you're not working out and you're experiencing that, then don't take it on days when you're not working out. Take it on the days where you are. Does creatine help with generalized myasthenia? It can. The problem with myasthenia, depending on what kind of antibody positivity you have, Marcia, myasthenia seizes the communication of the nervous system to the muscle. So when the muscles are trying to contract to do something under the influence of the nervous system, generally the neurochemical for that is called acetylcholine. So you either have antibodies to acetylcholine or antibodies to acetylcholine receptors. And so the nerve tells the muscle to contract. And that part's being blocked by an autoimmune process. The muscle itself, it's not an all or none. It's not like your nerves can or can't talk to your muscle. It's just a diminished impact. So what happens in myasthenia is the person will go to use their muscle, and their muscle strength will give out faster because their acetylcholine runs out. And so the neurological message stimulating the muscle contraction, goes away quickly. Now, creatine may help with extending the time frame by which your muscles have strength, but it's not going to override the neurological mechanism of autoimmunity on the acetylcholine or acetylcholine receptor. And so for that, you need to figure out what's causing that. And that's an autoimmune process. Food, chemicals, microbes, and nutritional deficiencies are the top primary triggers that I have seen clinically in people with myasthenia. Okay, guys, I'm over time. It's almost 2. I want to say thank you for joining me today. Thanks for tuning in. And look, we're here next Tuesday for another live crash course, and then we'll be back here next Thursday for another live Q&A. So if you want to learn more about nutrition, this is the place. Make sure you hit like, make sure you hit the subscribe button, and hit that little bell afterwards so that when our videos are getting ready to go live, you'll get a notification coming your way to let you know we're gonna talk. So those of you who want to support Gluten-Free Society, we appreciate that. You support us every week by being here, but if you want to support us in other ways, please come visit our store. We've got over 100 products that you can choose from in terms of your supplement needs. We also have lab testing for those of you who are looking to determine whether or not a gluten-free diet is the right move to make. You can get gluten tested for those of you who want to know whether or not you have vitamin and mineral deficiencies. We have lab tests that help you to identify those things. And we really appreciate your support when you use our services. And until next week, I hope you all have a fantastic weekend. We'll see you then. Take care.